Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another installment of our Blue Ocean Spec series. This is a series that we do in which we highlight some undervalued comics that are out there that you might already have in your collection or will potentially stumble across while you're out there hunting for comics. These are some cool books, but these are not necessarily books that you want to rush out and buy because we don't know if they're going to go up in value, which is why you're going to have to listen to the rationale that we put forth over the course of this video and decide for yourselves whether this is something that you want to be on the lookout for. The other thing that I will tell you is that over the course of this video, I'm going to be referring to the fair market values. Those values actually come from Cover Price, which is a great resource for being able to find the fair market value of both raw and graded comics. With that said, let's get to the list.
Tired of paying 10%, 15% or more to sell your cards, comics, and digital collectibles? How does 1% sound? Too good to be true? Well, not anymore. MySlabs.com is the web's premier user-driven marketplace for buying and selling slabbed cards, sealed wax, and now slabbed comics and digital collectibles. So the next time you're forced to pay 10% or more to sell something from your collection, head over to MySlabs.com and join the 1% revolution.
Book number 1, published by DC Comics in 1983, is New Teen Titans issue number 34. Typically, whenever we put together a list of this sort, we are using our heads to put forth a rational argument as to why this book should be on the list. We're definitely going to do that in this situation, but we're going to mix it with a little bit of heart as well, because this first book is associated with the legendary George Perez. George recently announced that he has terminal pancreatic cancer, and so Doug and I wanted to pay tribute to him in this installment. And so how better to do that than to mention one of his books and to put forth a rationale to support it as well. Some would argue that George does not receive the proper recognition for the covers that he has created over his career. Most people know him for covers like New Teen Titans issue number 1 or Crisis on Infinite Earths issue number 7. But we'd like to submit this book, New Teen Titans issue number 34, as a George Perez classic cover. Now, this book actually has some other things going for it besides the cover that I want to talk about first. To that point, New Teen Titans issue number 34 is the third full appearance of Deathstroke, arguably one of DC's greatest villains to come out of the Bronze Age. And for some reason or another, this book is not contained in Key Collector app. Deathstroke is incredibly popular, and this book has to be mentioned as a result of that. Now, to my earlier point, this book also has a wonderful cover, but what makes the cover special? In our minds, when you think about Deathstroke's first appearance, it was in New Teen Titans issue number 2. Now, he was on the cover of that book, but he was obscured in the shadows. He was in the background, he was obscured, you could not see his upper body nor his iconic mask. What you get with issue number 34 is you get all of Deathstroke. You get the full Monty of who Deathstroke is right there on the cover of this comic. Now, what's really interesting is the fair market value of a raw copy of this book is only $3.32. A graded 9.6 will set you back $37.99. I should probably also mention that there is a Canadian price variant version of this book out there. At present, there are 2 copies of this book on the CGC census that are Canadian price variants compared to more than 100 of the American version. Occasionally, you can find the Canadian version pop up on eBay for a few extra dollars, so if that is of interest to you, just know that they are out there. Book number 2 is Adventure Time with Finn and Jake, issue number 2, published by Kaboom in 2012. For more than a decade, Adventure Time was a wildly popular Cartoon Network animated series that followed 12-year-old Finn and his magic dog Jake, who battled evil in an imaginary land of Ooo. Popular among both kids and adults, the colorful, stylized character design and art made this show a beautiful and easily recognizable property to adapt into comic book form. 12-year years later, this show is bound to reappear or to see a spike in interest as its younger viewers grow into seasoned comic book collectors, a recipe that has increased the values of similar comic adaptations over generations. Don't believe me? Check out the value of early comics featuring Scooby-Doo, Space Ghost, Spider-Man and his amazing friends, X-Men Adventures, and The Simpsons, just to name a few. Adventure Time issue number 1, the first appearance of many of these characters, has already seen an increase in value. However, this has not trickled down to issue number 2. When you dig into the data, what you see is the fair market value for a raw copy of this comic is only $3.16 with no graded FMV. And let's be honest, this is a comic that you can find out there in the wild, probably in the kids section in the back of the long box. HBO Max recently announced that they are bringing Adventure Time back, this time starring Fiona and Cake. Don't be surprised if Jake and Finn pop up in that series or in a series of their own in the near future. One of the other things I wanted to mention here is that Adventure Time issue number 1, which is the first appearance of a lot of these characters, actually has some later print runs, specifically a second, third, and fourth print, with each one having unique cover art. None of these later prints are actually mentioned in key collector apps, so you potentially want to keep your eyes open for them. I will tell you that these later print runs are scarce, so they're out there, but I would encourage you to not overpay if you happen to see them. Book number 3, The Hands of Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, issue number 121, published by Marvel Comics in 1982. Nearing the end of the Shang-Chi run, issue number 121 featured some art from a relatively new artist to comics, David Mazzucchelli. David actually had a brief but spectacular career in mainstream comics, becoming Frank Miller's artist of choice anytime Frank wrote a comic but chose not to draw it. Mazzucchelli, an extremely influential comic artist to this day, provided artwork for the Daredevil Born Again run as well as Year One, and many of Mazzucchelli's covers from these comics and their subsequent trades are considered classic comics. David left mainstream comics in 1980 to do his own independent work, including award-winning anthologies and graphic novels, including Rubber Blanket and also City of Glass. David continues to influence artists as a speaker and as a teacher of graphic storytelling at the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. With the hyper-focus on characters that are being pulled into movies and TV shows, oftentimes a creator's first published work can actually go under the radar. But potentially because of David's influence, his body of work, his influence on other artists, you might actually want to add his first comic book work to your collection, particularly when that first published work has a current raw fair market value of only $4.32. A 9.8 of this comic will set you back only $29.99. Speaking of his influence on the industry and on other creators, David was recently in the spotlight, and you may not have actually known that it was him. Daredevil Woman Without Fear issue number 2 made all sorts of hot lists recently with a stunning 1:25 ratio variant cover by Jorge Fornes. This cover is an homage to Marvel Age issue number 36 by, you guessed it, David Mazzucchelli. Now what's really interesting here is that the homage is selling for over $100. But the original comic that influenced this book is still being found in dollar bins. This is a classic Mazzucchelli cover that has an FMV of only $5.59 with no graded FMV. This guy is a legend. He influences the industry and other creators, and his book is out there. With that said, we're going to wrap this video up. I want to thank you for checking it out, and hopefully you enjoyed this installment of the Blue Ocean spec video. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I want to encourage you to do so now. That way you won't miss out on any of the content that comes out from the channel. If you need to reach out to me, you can do that on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.